Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, saha viryam karavavahai, tejasvina vaditamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Oh, dearly beloved Lord, may the divine being look over us as a mother and father. May the divine being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So, a great good morning to everyone. We'll start with just this one announcement. We will not celebrate Thanksgiving with a gathering of the congregation this year. The virus is still too great a danger, so we're not having any public gatherings of any kind, and that's a real shame. I'm sorry about that, and I wish it were otherwise, but we all wish that, I'm sure. November is a month for study of Karma Yoga, a spiritual path leading to the abandonment of selfishness. As a karma yogi, you practice offering your actions and the results, as well as your perceptions, thoughts, and feelings to the divine presence. Here is a prayer that is chanted by the congregation in unison at the end of a Puja's homa fire ceremony at the Hollywood Center. It's just an example of what's meant by offering all of your who you are. The chant goes this way: no matter what I may have done, said, or thought, in waking, dreaming, or dreamless sleep, with my mind, my tongue, my hands, or my other members, may all that be an offering to the divine presence. So that is a little, if you want to learn that little prayer, it will be with the notes of today's talk on the website. So even before fully knowing this divine presence, you hold firmly to the belief that the presence is within each person or other living being that you interact with or serve. Working and abiding in this spirit, you are increasingly able to release attachment to your activities and their results. And that is a fact. If you actually do this, you will be increasingly able to release attachment to your activities and results. This yields the freedom and contentment promised by Karma Yoga. Here's what Krishna says in chapter 2 of the Gita. Even a little practice of this yoga will save you from the terrible wheel of rebirth and death. So before we start into our morning's topic, are there any comments or questions that anyone has to offer from their own wisdom or experience about the practice of Karma Yoga? Any concern or question that you'd like to raise about the practice of Karma Yoga, the abandonment of selfishness, the abandonment of I, me, mine, and the adoption of what Sri Krishna so carefully outlines in chapters 3 through 6 of the Gita, abandoning the idea and practice of I, me, mine, and instead taking up the practice of thou, thee, thine, making the effort to see the thou in every being you interact with. Any comments or questions or concerns? All right. Now, this talk that I'm going to give on the fall festivals and the goddess Kāli, I would appreciate it if you would hold your comments and questions about this talk until the end of the talk. That'll allow us to move right through and not go too far over the hour, because there's a good bit to cover here, and it's of interest to us, I believe, because of the connection with these fall festivals to a very ancient tradition in India. So the topic is fall festivals and the goddess Kāli. This past Sunday was Halloween, a contraction of All Hallows Eve. In Old English, hallow in Old English, hallow meant saint and indicates the Roman Catholic Church had incorporated an ancient northern tradition, Samin, into its calendar of ritual observances. In the early 8th century, Pope Gregory III designated the 1st of November as All Saints' Day, honoring saints and martyrs. He also decreed October 31st as All Hallows' Eve, a nighttime vigil of prayer and veneration. And of course, October 31st is when we celebrate Halloween or observe Halloween. Samin, this ancient tradition that the Catholic Church adopted, Samin means summer's end. In Northern Europe, the end of the light half of the year and the beginning of the fearsome dark half, which brought with it a need for ritualistic protection. They felt the need for ritualistic protection during that dark half of the year. And as we go along, we'll see why this was perhaps more important than we might think. This morning, we'll take a journey through the ages, recalling fall festivals that celebrate the dead. This will include discussion of mythology and artistic expressions that can be traced back to the goddess Kāli. We'll talk about Samin, All Souls' Day, All Saints' Day, Halloween, Dia de los Muertos, which means Day of the Dead, Diwali, and the Festival of the Lanterns, and identify how some of these celebrations have ancient astronomical and ritualistic connections to Kāli Ma. We'll begin with a Western tradition. All Souls' Day is a primarily Roman Catholic festival day when people remember loved ones who have passed away. So I'll start that again since I kind of bobbled it. All Souls' Day is a primarily Roman Catholic feast day when people remember loved ones who have passed away. In Mexico and now in many parts of the United States, this is widely and elaborately celebrated as the Day of the Dead. In the United Kingdom and the US, we have Halloween with its roots in the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. On that night, people lit bonfires to symbolically ward off the lengthening darkness, and wore costumes to disguise themselves from roaming ghosts and goblins. Samhain, which became Halloween. Why is there a link between scary creatures and activities and Halloween? Most fall festivals have histories that are not that demonic. Yet Halloween imagery includes themes of death, evil, the occult, and mythical monsters. Black and orange are the holiday's traditional colors because they are associated with night and with fire. Can you already hear a whisper of Kāli's terrible form and the colors associated with the worship of that terrible form? Samhain, later to be called Halloween, seems to have originated at least 2,000 years ago in the Celtic cultures of Northern Europe. Druids, the priests of these cultures, celebrated their new year on November 1st, the end of the summer and the harvest season and the beginning of the cold, dark winter, which they naturally associated with death. According to legend, Druids believed that on the night before November 1st, October 31st, wicked souls or spirits, which had been condemned to live in the bodies of animals during the past year, were free to roam about, that in the darkness human beings were surrounded by spirits, ghosts, witches, and wicked fairies and elves who could harm them. Cats especially were thought to be people who, as punishment for evil deeds, had been reincarnated in that form. That's why witches, ghosts, and cats are part of Halloween imagery today. On the night of October 31st, Druid priests offered sacrifices to their gods. Their summer's end festival included huge bonfires. Bonfire comes from bone fire, a fire in which burned bones, the burned bones of sacrificed animals, are to be found. Animals and the harvest's plenty. The animals that had been raised were selected, certain animals were selected to be sacrificed. And the first fruits and the best fruits of the harvest were burned to propitiate otherworldly spirits, asking for those demigods' protection during the bitterly cold winter to come. And here's what I meant about we will understand a bit better why these things were so associated. Northern Europe already gets cold, but during the Little Ice Age, which started in 1300 and ends sometime after 1800, there was a Little Ice Age. It became bitterly cold. And if you did not have enough, you would not survive that cold winter. And as the night of Samhain fell, so this is why this desire for ritualistic protection. As the night of Samhain fell, people dressed in symbolic costumes, a form of magic meant to avoid being recognized by roaming spirits. The costumed person hoped they would be mistaken for a fellow spirit and not be attacked. Now, this may seem comical to us now, but it was part of that culture, deeply embedded in that culture. And as we'll see, this does track back to, and there seems to be a series of direct links back to a special form of worship of the terrible form of Kāli, the form of Kāli associated with death, that was observed at this time of year in India. Now we have something at Halloween called trick-or-treating, of course, dressing up in costumes and begging door to door for treats. It's now customary for children at Halloween. It dates back to the Middle Ages and a tradition called souling. Poor folk would go from door to door on Halloween, All Saints' Day, November 1st, on Hallowmas, Hallowmas, not Halloween, Hallowmas. The Mass is short for Mass, the Mass that is celebrated for All Saints' Day, November 1st. Families would give them pastries called soul cakes in return for the beggar's promise to pray for the family's dead relatives on All Souls' Day, November the 2nd. This offering of soul cakes was encouraged by the Catholic Church as a way to replace the Celtic practice of leaving food and wine on the doorstep for roaming spirits on Samhain. Catholics and Anglicans celebrate All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day because they believe there is a prayerful spiritual communion between those who have died in the state of grace and souls being purified in purgatory. Again, this may seem curious to us, but within those traditions, it is a reality that there are souls who have died not in a state of grace, either because they didn't receive the final rites or because they were so wicked as to have not been properly churched at all, souls of their dead relatives being purified in purgatory. So there is this prayerful communion, and this is the thread that runs through this communion between the living and the dead that goes through these traditions. So a communion between those who have died in a state of grace and souls being purified in purgatory. So there's this attempt to reach out to those who have died in a state of grace and encourage them to to help in the purification of their loved ones who are in purgatory. Souling may have originated in Ireland and Britain, although similar practices for the souls of the dead are found as far south as Italy. Of course, it's a Catholic tradition. It's interesting, we have jack-o'-lanterns associated with Halloween. Here they are pumpkins. Here's why. The carving of jack-o'-lanterns springs from the souling custom of carving turnips into lanterns as a way of remembering souls held in purgatory. Now, turnips come from under the ground. So the turnip was a readily available vegetable, and turnip is not something that grows in the sun. So it's associated a little bit with this this aspect of not quite pure. The turnip was traditionally used in Ireland and Scotland at Halloween, but immigrants to North America used the native pumpkin, which was both readily available and much larger and easier to carve than turnips. So a bit losing that association with the underworld, or something that's grown in the ground and something that grows above ground, the pumpkin. But it was, as it said, it was easily available and much larger and easier to carve. Now, there are many other festivals of the dead that are celebrated at this exact same time of year. Many cultures hold a festival of the dead, lasting up to 3 days at the end of October and the beginning of November, in honor or recognition of the deceased members of the community. In the Andes, called Koyasuyu in their language, in the Andes, in Inca So in the Andes, in Inca religion, the entire month of November is Ayamarka, which translates as Festival of the Dead. In the southern hemisphere, November marks the beginning of spring and the return of the sun from the north, a very auspicious time. The Incas practiced mummification. During Ayamarka, the mummies of dead kings were brought to the main square of the capital, Cusco, and other cities. People sang and danced around those mummies, and as they dressed them in valuable clothes and offered foods. Other ceremonies, very elaborate, using fire and going deep into the night, are held by local village shamans called yatiris. I actually witnessed this. It's really very moving. I visited the Andes in the late 80s. They have elaborate dances where they're holding torches deep into the night and dancing in ritualistic patterns, all meant to offer this ritualistic protection against evil spirits. I mentioned earlier that we would talk about Dia de los Muertos. Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, is celebrated each year in Mexico and wherever a community of Mexican descent is found. Spanish conquistadors arrived in the New World to find indigenous peoples practicing a ritual many thousands of years old by that time that seemed to mock death. However, the Maya, Aztecs, and other ethnic groups of that region saw death not as an end, but as an extension of life, as a passage to the next world, and thus it was in fact not a mockery, but a celebration. Festivities were held to honor the departed and not to belittle them. For some of us, it may be strange that death and festivities can go hand in hand. Yet for most Mexicans, the two are intricately intertwined. The ancient indigenous peoples of Mexico, and there are a number of them that participated in this, believed that the souls of the dead return each day to visit with their living relatives, to eat drink, and be merry, just as they did when they were living. Now, the Spanish at first tried to stop this, but they were unable to do it. So they tied the native rituals to the Catholic Festival of the Dead, All Hallows Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day. In other words, October 31st, November 1st, and November 2nd. Deceased children, this is in both the traditions, the Catholic and the Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. Deceased children, called little angels, are remembered on November 1st, All Saints' Day. Toys and colorful balloons adorn their graves. The next day, All Souls' Day, adults who have died are honored with displays of the departed's picture, their favorite food and drink, as well as ornamental and personal belongings. Flowers, particularly a special type of marigold, which is sacred to the Nahua goddess of the cosmos, Tonantzin. Tonantzin means tona, tonal means cosmos, Tsin means mother, mother of the cosmos. So that's this goddess. So it's this particular flower, this particular marigold is associated with her. And candles, so marigolds and candles are placed on the graves. These guide the spirits home to their loved ones. On the Day of the Dead at 6 p.m., bells begin to ring, and they ring every 30 seconds, summoning the dead. They ring throughout the night. At sunrise, the ringing stops, and those relatives who have kept the night-long vigil visit. The relatives who have kept the night-long vigil go home. Now again, this may seem strange to us, but to them it is very joyous, and they really believe that their dead relatives do visit them and partake in the food and enjoy the drink and enjoy the festivity and are honored and loved at that time. So again, if you have any questions, please do save them for the end. Do remember them and save them. Japan has something called the Festival of the Lanterns. Obon is a shortened form of Ulambama. In Japanese. Ulambama is a transliteration of the Sanskrit word hanging upside down. Ulambama is a transliteration of the Sanskrit word for hanging upside down and implies great austerity or suffering. In this context, it means deliverance from suffering, and specifically refers to the salvation of anguished souls in hell. The Japanese hold an Obon festival, which lasts for 3 days, to honor the spirits of these ancestors. This Buddhist Confucian custom is a family reunion holiday. People return to ancestral family places and visit and clean their ancestors' graves. Spirits of their ancestors are supposed to revisit the household's altar. Now, this is very, very similar to this Dia de los Muertos of the Mexicans, of the ancient Mexican people and the current Mexican population. So Oban has been celebrated in Japan for at least 500 years. Now, there is an astronomical association for all of these fall festivals and rituals that are held worldwide. For example, the Virgin of Guadalupe is said to be a merging of Mother Mary with Tonan Sin, that goddess that I mentioned earlier, Tonan, cosmos, Sin, mother of the universe. There's a wonderful legend, you can look into it, about this merging of these two aspects of the goddess to become the Virgin of Guadalupe. Guadalupe's celebration can be traced to a pre-conquest festival honoring Tonantzin at the winter solstice, December 12th, in the Julian calendar. So too we see the origins of the Catholic Church's Day of the Dead in the Nahua ritual known as the binding of the years. That date in their calendar corresponds to November 1st in the Gregorian calendar. So December 12th in the Julian calendar corresponds to November 1st in the Gregorian calendar. Less than a quarter hour after the midnight of October 31st, November 1st, the star formation we call the Pleiades passes through the zenith above Tula and Tenochtitlan. Now, these are two principal cities of what we now call Mexico. They were Toltec and Aztec cities. And therein this association with the Pleiades, we find the link among all these worldwide observances that honor the dead, the Pleiades. Some other Native American myths about the Pleiades are: the Cherokees teach that Native Americans originated long ago in the Pleiades and assert that indigenous peoples are on Earth as star seeds with a mission of bringing light and knowledge. So this is how important it was to the Cherokee. The Navajo call the Pleiadian star cluster the sparkling suns. And the Iroquois petition the constellation for happiness. And again, the Lakota Dakota people, who we call the Sioux, but their proper name, they live up in North Dakota, South Dakota, and southern Canada, that area. The Lakota Dakota people say their ancestors are from the Pleiades. So this is this tremendous connection with this star cluster, which we'll see traces back to Kāli. The Spanish conquerors of Mexico also found there a tradition that the world was once destroyed and reborn when the Pleiades were overhead at midnight. The identical tradition that we find in the Far East, a myth so prevalent as to suggest a foundation in fact. So is it a coincidence that the goddess that we most associate with the destruction and dissolution of the world, Ma Kāli, Shakti associated with Shiva, is also worshipped during the night at the time of the year when the Pleiades are prominent in the night sky? We know that Kāli Puja was just observed last Thursday. If you check, you'll find that the Pleiades were prominent in the night sky. Fall festivals in Mexico can correspond with Jantar Puja, a celebration of the first fruits of winter rice, held in November by the Bengal Santals. The Santals call one of their sub-tribes by their name for the Pleiades, Saren. Hindus in the western part of India, who trace their descent from the mother goddess Amba, which, now note this, they trace their descent from the mother goddess Amba, which is the chief star of the sacred Pleiades. They begin the year with this month, Kartik, October, November. The great Hindu star festival, Diwali, or Deepavali, meaning a row of lights, is held, a row of lamps, meaning a row of lamps, is held in the same month. Streets and houses are illuminated to signify the triumph of good over evil. Diwali was just ended on Saturday, I believe. We just celebrated it Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So Diwali, with this row of lamps, or many, many lamps, to signify the triumph of good over evil. Lamps are kept on all night, and firecrackers are set off to drive away evil spirits. The Santal name for the Pleiades, Saren, is connected with the Vedic, this word, I can't quite read it. Anyway, the mother of the twins, day and night, whatever that is, if you know it, who still retains her place in Indian mythology as the god Hari. So there is this goddess connected with the Vedic name as the mother of the twins, day and night, who still retains her place in Indian mythology as Hari. She was also called Amba, the mother, the first star in the Pleiades, who led her sons, the fathers, and, She is called Amba, the mother, the first star in the Pleiades, who led her sons, the farmers and mariners of southern India, into Persia, Egypt, Syria, Asia Minor, and Greece. And so we see this Pleiadian tradition spreading with these farmers and mariners of South India. So the position of the Pleiades, and not the sun, seem to have governed some most significant rituals and celebrations of the primeval year. Annual festivals for the dead were celebrated at the time when the Pleiades were first visible on the horizon at evening. In the most ancient calendar of India, the month which began their year was Kartik, our October-November. Memorial services for the dead at this time of year, when the Pleiades occupy a conspicuous position in the heavens, seem to be a feature in the history of almost every culture on earth, from remote antiquity to the present day. The universality of social and spiritual customs linked to this distant group of 7 stars may be considered one of the most remarkable facts that astronomical history records. when I say they're distant, they're over 400 light years from Earth. Now that's not very far in astronomical terms, but it's, if we consider that it takes over 400 years for light to travel from here to there, that's a fair distance away. The goddess Kāli, who was at the center of Sri Ramakrishna's divine play, has ancient links to the Pleiades. Kāli Puja was recently and elaborately celebrated at Belur Math, in the temple at our Hollywood Center, and at other Vedanta centers in the West, and of course in Indian communities everywhere. Ma Kali's Daughter Festival, our Halloween, with its traditional ties to the Pleiades through its connection to Samin, was observed last Sunday night. So I think we can justifiably say Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma. And now, since you've been kind enough to hold your questions and thoughts, and we have plenty of time to take questions, and anything that you know from your own experience, from your own background, that you'd like to share, please do.
Well, I'll jump in here. I think it's really great to know all these different celebrations in all these different parts of the world and times of the history of the world that definitely relate. I mean, be hard pressed to say that's crazy. It's not. It works. And I also love that we're learning about it because, we have the freedom in this day and age to incorporate these into our own celebrations. And my brother is involved in a yearly festival, music and cultural festival in California that's around Halloween and the Day of the Dead, and they've started doing the Day of the Dead altars, but they do one beautiful big altar. Actually, my sister-in-law makes it, and it's the community altar. And people who come to the festival bring, photos of their loved ones who have gone on, and food and flowers, and it's really, really something. So it's neat to see that people incorporate these things into their own lives that maybe they didn't grow up with, but that have meaning to them.
Thank you, Cindy, for sharing all that. Yes, indeed. What Cindy didn't mention is that her brother lives in California, which of course has as a senator, Senator Hayakawa once said about California, oh, well, we stole it from Mexico fair and square. There is a huge Mexican population of people of Mexican descent in California. And in the Mexican communities, for instance, of Los Angeles, if you go and visit around this time of year, you'll see these altars that have been put outside the homes. And then, of course, they do visit the graveyards and hold the celebration. But these altars are really quite remarkable. And so it's good that people are absorbing this tradition, as Cindy said, who didn't grow up with it. But it is a remarkable way of remembering the dead and celebrating them, which, of course, if we are to believe Vivekananda, they haven't gone anywhere. and as Sri Ramakrishna said, they're just behind the curtain. So thank you, Cindy. Anybody else? Anything?
Yes, that reminds me, before COVID, I used to love riding my bicycle around Los Angeles, and I would ride through the Hispanic community during the Day of the Dead. And I was quite amazed how the imagery was so similar to Halloween. But now I have a question, perhaps a bit controversial, but I think this is a good open forum for us to discuss this. Many of the people believed that they would do rituals for protection from evil spirits. Is it possible that we can be assailed by evil spirits? And if so, how do we protect ourselves from them?
The short answer is yes. We can be attacked by jealous spirits. And this is why it's said in the evening prayer, breaker of this world's chain, without question, thou shelterest us.
Thou shelterest us.
When we take refuge in the divine being, they protect us. And Krishna says this in the Gita. It's mentioned in the various Upanishads, that our refuge is in the divine. If you read the Chandi, the story of the Divine Mother and her interaction with her children, both human gods, devas in Sanskrit, and then the evil beings, the asuras and daityas.
Yes, I've been through that many times with Harinamananda, Swami Harinamananda.
Well, the asuras and the daityas, I mean, right now, if you lived in certain cultures of the world that are ruled by people of this nature, you wouldn't have to ask the question, can they attack you? If you get out of line even a little bit, they attack you, but good. But can they attack you in subtle form as well? Yes, this is what we're told. They do become jealous of spiritual advancement, and this is why we need to take refuge in the divine. And this is why it says of Sri Ramakrishna, without question thou shelterest us. And the world's great sea in its wrath seems shrunk to the puddle that fills a hoofprint in the clay.
Right. And if you are forced to interact with a person who acts as if they are, I mean, really, I've been forced to interact with people who act as if they're demonically possessed. They've been so inhuman. What is the strategy? Both Kāli,
chant your mantra.
Chant your mantra. Okay.
I mean, just as you're with them and having to interact with them, just chant your mantra. Recall your divine protection. Anyone else? Anything? Thank you very much for that very. I mean, these rituals that were practiced around the world for protection from evil. And of course, there are major pujas celebrated at the Hindu temples around the world, but they've been celebrating them at the Hindu temples here in Atlanta because of the pandemic and all its, I mean, there's the subtle associations with what's going on with the pandemic are very well known to the people who are deciding what sorts of rituals to practice at those temples. And great pujas and great rituals of protection are being performed at the temples. Anyone else?
Yes, Brother Shankara.
Yes, Aaron.
I think like someone like myself who has like their struggles with mental health, like is prone to these so-called demonic and evil spirits, which makes it like very important. I mean, of course it's important for everybody, but I feel like for me, like it's possible that I could be prone or more vulnerable to these like bad spirits.
Aaron, if you say so, I'm sure it must be so. And so, yes, practice, it just helps to practice recollection of your dependence on and your relationship with the divine and take refuge there. Yes, to all you said. Thank you for bringing it up. Anything else from anyone?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Tom.
Okay, so I just read a book that had a big effect on me. It was about the eradication of smallpox.
Uh-huh.
Like in just some numbers, in the 20th century, all the wars of the 20th century killed a total of about 100 million people. Smallpox, that's World War II, the Holocaust, World War I, Vietnam, Korea, everything. All the wars of the 20th century killed 100 million people. Smallpox in the 20th century killed 500 million people. Most of them were or an awful lot of them were children. It was very painful death, sores all over you. It was horrible. And those 500 million deaths occurred between 1900 and 1980. 500 million people died. Since 1980, nobody's died. Nobody's died from smallpox because it's been totally eradicated from the earth. It's like one of the biggest deals there is. So India was one of the last places where they were able to eradicate it, and they had a lot of problems with people thinking that it was coming from a god and not wanting to take the vaccine and so on. And as they gradually switched a lot of people from thinking that smallpox was coming from a virus rather than from a god, they were able to wipe it out. So that's kind of what I think when I hear about the evil spirit thing. It may be true. I can't say for sure that it's not true, but there might be a better approach that would enable us to, I don't know, deal with these things better. Just like when we understood that smallpox was a virus and not an evil spirit, we were able to eradicate it. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Yes.
And I would add to that, now it's COVID that's killing everybody. I would say the numbers are similar.
Not nearly as high. I mean, COVID's a bad thing and it's killing a lot of people, but not nearly as high as smallpox. 500 million, that's 500 million people. I think
not
COVID's
yet.
killed quite a few million, but nowhere near 500 million.
Well, as I said, in the late 80s, I visited the Andes, and here was a story that was circulating. A PhD candidate had been living in a village, studying the practices of the shaman there, the yatiri. And at one point, a very bad bacterial disease came into the community, and many people were dying. And the student went to the yatiri and said, well, why aren't you protecting them? Why isn't your why doesn't your shamanistic practice protect them? And the yatiri said, well, I don't have the money to buy the antibiotics. Do you have the money? So yes, our responses to these things, we understand in 20th century terms. whether or not there is this business of being attacked by evil spirits. Everyone is welcome to their opinion. I mean, there's no dogma here about these things. Brahmadas asked a question. It was answered as best as the question could be answered as it is understood. It's perhaps not altogether auspicious to disregard the understandings that people have come to over millennia, simply because we have a different understanding in the 21st century. Anything else from anyone?
Yes, Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
Yes, in the Hindu tradition, the Day of the Dead, it's called the Pitra Paksh. That's when it's really a very solemn affair, and you really worship the ancestors and the departed souls, and you also ask for forgiveness, and you do a lot of repentance for anything you may have not honored them in some way, or disrespected, or any other bad way. So it's the opposite of Diwali, I would say. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, thank you for bringing that up. And these other ritual observances of the days of the dead, Day of the Dead, or Days of the Dead, there is also that aspect of asking for forgiveness and asking for the relationship to be fully enjoyed by both the departed and the living. But then it goes in for example, in Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, is practiced by the Mexican cultures and in the Andean region also. Then the merriment begins. Okay, we've established that there may have been problems in the relationship and so on, and we're sorry for anything that we may have done or said or not done or not said. But now let's enjoy the restored relationship.
So that day in the Hindu calendar always comes before Navaratri and before Diwali. So yes, it always falls before that. Yes. So this year it was
October-November. It's that October-November month that is called Kartik, isn't it?
No, that day comes usually in September, end of September. It's a 2-week period. It's a 2-week period. It falls usually in September. And then come Navratri, and then followed by Dussehra. Dussehra is when they burn the effigy of Ravan. And then Diwali. That's when.
I got it. Okay, thank you.
No.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Somebody has their mic open and we're hearing them have a little altercation. So anything that you'd like to offer?
I just want to say hello to everyone, and I am so grateful to hearing all these participations. I always, open to listen and to learn, many things that I hear.
Well, thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. You have a nice weekend.
You too, dear.
Till the next time. Thank you.
Thank
God
you.
bless you. God bless you. Thank you.
And you too, dear.
Thank you.
So anyone else, anything at all on this topic or anything else?
Brother Shankara, from what you read, I kind of see that not only our souls are connected as one, we are culturally, ritually also, ritualistic ways also, we are connected in the world. That's what I grasped after you read about Japan, Halloween, India, and all these countries. We all have something common, not only the soul, but also the culturally and rituals also.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. This is one of the things that is a continuing discussion among mythologists. How does this happen? Is it diffusion? This is the idea. Some mythologists say, okay, this all started, and the farmers and mariners of South India moved into Persia, Asia Minor, Greece, and then that diffused into Europe. Or is this an independent discovery? Truth is one, sages call it by many names. But in any event, it is a fact that there are many of these kinds of things. This is one, this Day of the Dead, or observance right around the end of October, beginning of November, when the Pleiades are very prominent in the sky. And the Pleiades, I mean, I only mentioned a few of the legends. I have this big file of the legends about the Pleiades and how they're just not that prominent. I mean, they are noticeable, but there are many star groupings that are noticeable. But this one really has a tremendous amount of association around the world. And so the Pleiades are significant. And just why? There's not a definite answer, apparently.
Thank you.
Anything else? But thank you for bringing that up, dear. Anything else?
Brother Shankara, that's forms the, the Sanatananda Dharma, how we are all united as one, like Hema said.
Yes.
If we can spread that feeling that in so many ways we are all one.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring this up as part of this Karma Yoga month. That there's a lot of action, a lot of activity around this time of year that has to do with our relationship with the departed and with this strange clustering of stars. It's a beautiful little star cluster. There's actually they're called the Seven Sisters, but astronomically, if you look through the telescope, you'll find that the grouping is really only of 6 stars, and then the 7th only appears to be a part of it because it is, though it's at a different distance, it's brighter and so appears to be part of the same constellation, though it's not actually.
Now, where can we learn more about this, the cluster of the stars? And
just go on your browser and put in whatever your search engine is, the Pleiades, and just be ready to read a lot of material. There's a ton of material out there.
Oh, okay.
Both astronomically, there's a lot of astronomical files out there about what the Pleiades are as stars, and then there's a tremendous amount of information about the legends.
Brother, I have like probably 2 questions.
Yes, please.
Try to be brief. The first thing is, the Obon festival held in Japan, that happens in August. So do you know why it happens kind of before everybody else? Because ours is around October.
No, well, I'm sorry. the information that I had
Oh,
was that it's at the same time. So
oh,
if I'm mistaken, I'm sorry, and I have no explanation for why there might be a difference. But I found this when I was looking for things associated with the end of October, beginning of November, and the Pleiades. So if you've lived there and you know differently, well then,
yeah.
I
The thing is, yeah, my wife is Japanese, so she was asking me that question. So that's why.
well, I'm sure she's right and I'm wrong.
No, there's nothing like that. Obong Festival
It's
happens
always in August.
August. It happens in August. That's what she's saying.
All right, there you are.
Yes, sir. Okay. So we were wondering why it's different from everybody else. Little bit.
I have no idea.
Okay.
Because as I say, the information that I had was not that it was in August, but that it was at the end of October, like these other festivals of the dead.
Okay.
And that is apparently mistaken information.
Oh, okay.
No.
Mhm. And the other one that I was going to ask was, we like I know this for a fact that we remember our ancestors by lighting up 14 candles the day before Kali Puja and Diwali. So that is a little bit of our Day of the Dead right there, I guess.
Oh yes, oh yes. And there are many, many different ritualistic.
Like we have Bhut Chaturdashi, which is basically where you do some similar stuff like bonfires and stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are many different. The different parts of India, of course, don't do things necessarily the same. People who don't know better think of India as homogenous. Of course, it's not true at all. And so there are many different rituals, but many of them are associated with this same time of year.
Yes, sir.
As you say, this is associated with Kali Puja, that one you just mentioned.
Yes, sir. And I have a feeling like I understand there were probably people traveling from here and there and kind of influencing different customs, which turn out to be kind of similar. I just feel that there probably were these spiritually advanced people back in the day, and ultimately we are children of the same God. So we probably realized in a spiritual sense that these are the things we'll be doing at this point of time. So maybe that's why things look so similar.
Well, that is one of the arguments that is presented by mythologists to substantiate their particular point of view on this. Just what you said, and so and that's I kind of summarized that by saying, "Truth is one; sages call it by many names."
Yes, sir.
And that is one of the arguments of the mythologists. But then there are the more scientific, more reductionist-minded scientific mythologists who insist on looking into this kind of diffusion idea. Since they're still arguing about it, how can we possibly, who don't have nearly their level of expertise, come to any judgment about it? We can simply observe that one group of them says this, another group says that, and another group indeed says another thing. So this is true of practically all the spiritual, the academic and scientific disciplines. There's hardly any unanimity among any. That's why it's hard to get hired at certain universities if you don't share the opinion of the department there.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of politics going on.
Well, it goes beyond politics. It's just, people's determination to be right, their opinions.
Yeah, and one of the conversations we were having about smallpox and how the vaccine wasn't accepted Well, I think there has always been a sense, means I know in some parts of India or even in US, there are certain communities who believe that science is antithetical to God. But
Yes.
I think the sooner we realize that the entire framework is God itself, and we are working within that framework. So no matter what it is, we kind of prove him at all times, prove it, that the existence of him is always there. So if it's coming up with a vaccine, that true was a work of God.
Well, that certainly is what Krishna asserts in the Gita.
So I feel more we think about the, like our existence is within his framework, means everything that within is his.
As long as we don't get dogmatic about it,
Yeah.
uh, we have no right to insist that our opinion is correct um, to someone who doesn't share that opinion. They are free to be self-determined. And there are people, as you pointed out, someone that I was speaking to on the phone recently said that people in their workplace were saying, I'm not going to have that poison jab.
Yes,
I'm not going to have that vaccine for the virus. Well, very well.
Another interest. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep. No,
Go
nothing
ahead.
else.
Okay. So if you read Be Here Now, which was a book by Ram Dass back in the 60s or 70s, it had a big effect on a lot of young Americans. The guru in there was Nim Crowley Baba. It's interesting. Nim Crowley Baba isn't real well known in India, but he's very well known among baby boomer spiritual seekers. So anyway, in the fight against smallpox, one of the instrumental people was a student of Nim Crowley Baba. He was a young doctor who had traveled overland to India, got involved with Nim Crowley Baba, and then Nim Crowley Baba told him, you are going to help eradicate smallpox. This is long before it happened. He said, go to Delhi right now and volunteer. And he went to Delhi and he volunteered, and the people said, we don't want you. You're a hippie. You have long hair. Go away. He went back to Nim Crowley Baba, and Nim Crowley Baba kept sending him there again and again and again. And finally, the guy figured out he needed to cut his hair, put on more normal clothing, push the fact that he was an MD. He got a job, I believe it was the World Health Organization, got a job with the World Health Organization of trying to eradicate smallpox in India, and was instrumental in making it happen. So
what an interesting story.
I'm not making any point. It's just interesting. The
Well,
book's
no,
worth
it is an
reading.
interesting. Well, one of the interesting points is this foreknowledge of Nim Crowley Baba. The Nim Crowley Baba did this with a number of people. Krishna Das. Krishna Das had no, the fellow who leads kirtan, leads bhajans and kirtan. He had no intention of doing that. And Nim Crowley Baba said, well, that's what you're supposed to do. Go do it. And so then look what he's become. He's become internationally renowned. And a great spiritual aspirant, if you hear his stories. Nim Crowley Baba is an interesting figure. And you're right, he's not famous in India, but he's well known among certain kinds of spiritual seekers here.
Brother, I think the problem in many aspects of every faith is we try to, as you said in the last session, you said, I think Father Thomas said that silence is the first language of God and everything else is a bad translation. It comes back to that same stuff. So we try to restrict our faiths in writing and scripture and everything, but I think it's more means you perceive it, you experience the presence. And if you actually tend to do it, then you will never take everything literally. And once you start literal interpretation of things, then things really go south.
Yes, I agree with you entirely. And this is, of course, why, though there are 4 yogas, the practice of meditation in some form or another, the turning within to heed that call, as Meister Eckhart said, there is a great silence calling to us from within. It serves you well to heed that call. So turning within, learning to practice contemplation, concentration, and meditation opens the vistas and certainly does, as you pointed out just now, make you less dogmatic. You become very reluctant to insist on any a literal interpretation or one opinion.
And well, a case in point, I have personally experienced this. I have met Mother Teresa. I was lucky enough to have her in our school campus, and she kind of did a prayer for our Children's Day when I was growing up in Calcutta, and such an awesome human being, right? And after her death, I was looking at the time it took for them to canonize her in the Catholic order, was at least 10 years after her death or something, close to it. And they were waiting for something called a miracle to happen. I was just astounded. This human being, she did so much for millions of kids, and they were still waiting for a miracle. Means, are we still trying to go for a literal interpretation of everything?
We can't judge the Catholic Church. I mean, the Catholic Church has its own ways of doing things. They're a couple of thousand years old, so to speak, since the 300s.
Yeah.
It's very hard for us to say what they should or shouldn't do, and whether Mother Teresa should be canonized by the Catholic Church or not. I assume from what you said that the canonization, the declaration of sainthood went forward.
2016, yes, and she, not even 10 years, I think even more than that. So 97 is when she passed, in 2016, so about close to 20 years.
Well, it took hundreds of years for them to declare Saint Teresa of Avila saint. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. They're looking for miracles.
Well,
that's where the literal interpretation actually hurts me. I mean, I feel like, come on, these people, we got to be deep.
Well,
I think Brother Shankara is ultimately it's an upadhi, so we can,
yes.
Canonization of being a saint, if we just boil it down to the basic and then just stick to one ideal, your chosen ideal, and just follow that path. I believe in that,
Well, the illumined souls, and there are many opinions about whether Saint Teresa of Calcutta was an illumined soul, but that it is a fact that the illumined souls can provide us with great inspiration, and help us understand ourselves and our reality the better. A good example of this is the book Love Poems from God, a collection of the testimony of 12 illumined souls, of people who are recognized as illumined souls. But you're right, we must not let that distract us from our chosen ideal. Our chosen ideal is exactly what it says it is, that which our heart chooses to focus on and to be with as spiritual practitioners, spiritual aspirants. Anything else from anyone, dears? This is what it's meant by studying the art of spirituality together. It's so delightful that so many of you have stayed on and are part of this discussion. All right. Let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let this infinite, universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Peace, Peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So, so delightful to have these gatherings. If there's nothing else from anyone, then we'll close with this. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So that's the prayer and the wish for each of us. Any final thought from anyone? All right, dears. Tomorrow evening, there will be that reading and discussion group on love poems from God. On Tuesday evening at 8 p.m., there's a class on the life of Holy Mother, as reflected in the book Sri Sharada Devi, Her Divine Play by Swami Chitanananda. On Wednesday night, we're in chapter 14 of Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. So
I did want to say one last thing. I really would have hated to have had to have carved a jack-o'-lantern out of a turnip.
yes.
That just sounds, I mean, I have a hard enough time with a nice, softish pumpkin, but also the pumpkin is the color of renunciation.
There we are.
Very good. Orange. Also the color of a tiger.
Yes, that.
Well,
yeah.
I have no idea how anyone would carve a lantern out of a turnip, but
Those Irish.
Surgical scalpel.
Right.
Well, those bandy-legged old Irishmen, they knew a thing or two. So, and they're my forebears. So until next time, dears. See you then.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma.